We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Bellet. Hey, BraveCo men, welcome back to the BraveCo podcast. This week, I have one of my great friends and partner, David Johnson. Dave, thanks so much for coming on here.
Sure.
So Dave, you lead our men's core groups here at Bethel. How long have you done that for?
We started actually 4 years ago to really get serious with this. We tried earlier as a church, but this in 2019, we really focused more on it, and we've grown since then, and it's been great.
Well, I mean, when I first came in to help lead the Bethel men's ministry, you and Carl were leading the core groups. And I just remember back to having our first couple of meetings together, and you're kind of like, who are these guys? But this is the honest truth. What I have found out is you are one of the most incredible men that I have ever met in my life. And the way that you have led your life and your family and your career is just, it's hard to find guys like you. And I think Cole and I have said this so many times, like, man, the best hidden secret of Bethel Church is Dave. And so thank you so much, man, for being such an example and showing up. And
well, it's great to work alongside you. I've really enjoyed the time that we've spent working together in the ministry of men.
I love it. Hey, will you tell us a little bit about your past life, where you were born, and kind of, what you did for a career and how you got into men's ministry?
Well, this is a long story because I'm getting, as you can tell from the hair, I've got a lot of.
I mean, we don't have to go, 2 hours on the story, but give us the high tops.
Yeah, I born a long time ago, and my parents moved quite a bit. My dad was in the oil business, so we were in Pennsylvania, Louisiana, Texas, Kansas, Alberta for a while. So really have a background of really moving quite a bit. In fact, the 11 years we've been in Redding, I've never lived anywhere that long.
Wow.
So we moved, and then my wife and I have moved many times. So this for us is now learning how to live in one place. So I met my wife in Louisiana, and we got married in 1972, and we had a dream together.
I wasn't even born yet.
Yeah, I know. You're the age of my daughter. Yeah. In fact, you two are just a few months apart. I think.
That's awesome.
So we had this shared dream to go to Alaska. So we were excited about that. We read books and magazines about Alaska. We were totally stoked. In fact, she had told her parents when she was 13, I'm going to Alaska when I grow up. And they said, yeah, sure you are. And 7 years later, we did. And we went, we drove up at the day that we got married. Started driving to Alaska. It was a week-long
trip. The day you
trip.
got married?
Oh, that afternoon we were on our way.
No way.
Yeah, and that was our honeymoon. And that was a good thing. And we spent all that time getting to know each other even much more deeply, just on a honeymoon to go do the next part of our life. When we didn't really know what we were going to do, we just knew we were going to go to Alaska. So we showed up in Alaska, no jobs. We had a little money, not much. Found an apartment in Fairbanks just before the pipeline days.
What time of year was it?
It was summer, which was
okay.
But we weren't worried about winter. We were looking forward to the excitement of snow and cold weather because we were totally into understanding Alaska, and we were excited about all the mystique of Alaska. And so we were there 40 years in Alaska. We were in Fairbanks, then we went to a little town at the end of the Alaska Highway, Delta Junction, which is where our kids, I would say that's what they feel like is their home, just a small town. And we went to the state capital, Juneau, for a number of years. And then we moved to Anchorage.
Were you moving because of work?
Yeah,
or were you moving because you got tired of the people? Like, were you robbing banks and moving, or what was happening?
Well,
unpaid debts?
Didn't think about robbing banks. We could have done that. I started working for the Alaska Department of Fish and Game in the early 1970s, and I got the first job I had. We stayed in Fairbanks for a number of years, and then I applied for a job in Delta Junction because I was interested in the bison herd that was there, and so I was the wildlife manager for that area, and including this interesting herd of bison in Alaska. And then we went to Southeast Alaska, which was just a wonderful time to be in a totally different environment. We think of Alaska as being cold, and it is. And yet Southeast Alaska, the Panhandle, is this amazing place where you think rain, not cold.
Oh.
It can get cool, but it's a lot of rain.
Not as much snow.
No, you could snow in the higher altitudes, and it does snow. In fact, there's a lot of snow because of all the precipitation. But the snow in the interior of Alaska is quite a bit less because it's actually less than here. Quite a bit less.
No way.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, see, I would have never even thought that.
Yeah. But along the coast is where the big snows are. And so we were there 4 years, went to Anchorage for a number of years, went back to our little town, Delta Junction. And then we went over to Sweden. We were there for Bible school and church university for a number of years.
And did you bring your kids there?
No, although they both came to visit, and we loved Sweden. I'm Swedish, half Swedish.
Would you leave your 3 and 4-year-old at home with someone else while you went to Sweden, or what? How old were they?
Oh, they were going off to college.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, and so they blessed us to go, and we had a wonderful time just being part of the Swedish culture, which I came to understand. I'm Swedish, I guess. It's just my genes understand that. And we came back to the United States not really understanding what we were going to do next. We started working in a church in Anchorage, and then we came here in 2012 for a sabbatical year. And that extended.
You didn't never stop sabbatical.
Yeah, we came back. We said we were going to come back in a year, and we did. And we sold our house and came here because we knew this was where we were supposed to be.
Man, I love that. What a wild adventure.
Yeah, it was many adventures, Linda. Not only me. I had many opportunities to be outdoors with extraordinary wildlife situations, capturing wild game from helicopters and radio collaring animals and tracking them in aircraft and being on the ground with live animals and bears. And then my wife, she also had her own adventure. She was an emergency medical technician in our small Alaska town. I was a volunteer firefighter in our small town. And we enjoyed boating in Southeast Alaska, had a small skiff, did a lot of fishing and hunting on the islands there. And it was a great time. All the things you hear about it's all true.
Do you miss it?
Yeah, I do. But you know what? I've thrown my heart over the fence for being here.
Yeah.
I am here. I am fully here.
Yeah. Gosh, that's wild. I think part of me would have been afraid to move to Alaska. Like, I look back at my life sometimes and think like, man, if I could do it over again and move to a place like Alaska after school, I don't know that I'd ever leave. With how much I love hunting and fishing, like it might actually be a real bad thing.
Oh yeah, you'd fit perfectly.
Yeah, because I got married right out of high school. At 18 years old, I was engaged. At 17, married at 18, and so it was like so focused on life and work, but just the hunting, fishing lifestyle, the outdoors, being in a helicopter, chasing animals, netting them, doing biology and stuff. Like that's a pretty dream life.
I got to see things that it's just extraordinary things. I have memories of seeing, for example, muskox off in the distance on Nunivak Island out in the Bering Sea, and the frozen Bering Sea all around, and then these pods of muskox, and see up in the alpine country in Southeast Alaska, and seeing the fjords and the ocean and the distant mountains 100 miles away. And these are great memories.
That's amazing. What was your example for marriage from your family?
Oh, no question. My parents, they had a good long run. And my dad would be the first. He's still with us. My dad would be the first to say it wasn't perfect, but from my perspective as a boy, what I saw was a marriage that just worked.
Wow.
And at times they just, like everybody, they'd have their arguments, but my dad would say something funny or my mom would say something funny, and then they'd laugh and they'd hug, and they didn't keep long accounts. They would get over their stuff.
Yeah.
And they were a great couple, and I knew right away that that's what I wanted.
Wow. What do you think makes marriage work? I mean, you've been married 41 years,
51.
51, sorry, 51.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're either saying yes all the time, right? And not having any opinion. And so the marriage works that, or you make tons of money. And no, I'm just kidding. Neither of those make marriage work. What has made 51 years of experience? What, in your opinion, what's been the secret and what's really helped you guys?
I guess I'm not entirely sure, but I think that one of the pieces of this is just strong communication. We really talk a lot. I love just talking to Linda. And I love driving places with her because we don't have these other distractions. And the other piece is another piece, and this might sound even a little strange, but I would say a good sex life is important.
Yeah.
And we have to fight for that. Wait a minute, sex is easy. It's like falling off a log. And early in our lives, it's true. Yeah. But and the reason the sex life is important, orgasms are obviously amazing, and that's great, but it's marriage can't be built on sex. Mm-hmm. But in some ways, it's almost like the mortar between the bricks.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, we've had a very long and happy sex life, and it's not like it's always been easy. Sometimes we've had to fight for it too. So I think, and I say that's important because of that connection, that human connection that is so deep. And when there's a difficulty in the marriage, or when there's sadness or whatever, sex helps to smooth over those pieces. And I think for us as men, we can't create alone a good sex life with our wives, but I think it's important for us to realize we have an important part in that, a dramatically important part. In fact, it may be even more important for us to really set the tone of communication and love and sacrifice and doing things for one another. And I've heard it said sometimes that one of the keys to a good sex life is to do the dishes. And that's a little bit silly, but it's not.
It doesn't hurt.
Yeah, and the reality is, if I'm doing the dishes, and I always do the dishes. I'm serious, I do. And just Linda cooks, I do the dishes.
Yeah.
And what that says to her is, I'm in this for her.
Yeah.
And she's in it for me.
Yeah.
And so, to me, one of the keys to this lifelong sexual relationship is connection and serving one another and just being friends.
I think a lot of guys who are married feel like the wife holds the key to the gate to sexual intimacy, and they somehow are the beggar. Right?
Sure.
Trying to figure out, how can I get a crumb, or how can I get let into that gate? And I don't think that a lot of men actually understand how really it's their job to not initiate sex. It's their job to initiate connection. Mm-hmm. It's their job to initiate safety and trust. And if we would do that, right? So I think so much of the time being able to show up and create teamwork. So let's start there. I think marriage is so much about teamwork and so much less about dictatorship and who is, right? I think a lot in maybe even your parents' age, it was a more of and not that your parents did this, but marriage a lot was looked at the man goes to work, which is practical. The wife stays home and makes the home, but whatever the guy says goes. that's a lot of the past, right? And I think that it's easy in today's age to, again, not a lot of people haven't seen marriage modeled as great teamwork. And on the best teams, I'm going to lay down my life to make sure that you succeed. And you're laying down your life to make sure I succeed. And you're playing the part that you're best suited for. And I'm playing the part that I'm best suited for. And it just feels like when we do that, right? When my focus is on how can I be the best teammate right now? So sure, Linda's cooking, you're doing dishes. That's teamwork. And there'll be sometimes, I'm sure, when you're cooking and she's going to do some dishes. And I know for Lauren and I, probably the past 5 years, we've really gelled as a team, like really gelled. And a lot of that is as the kids got older, our first set of kids and these new, are starting to have new kids, in this idea that like, okay, there's no hierarchy in the job that needs to be done.
Right.
There is, sometimes I'm better suited for it, like mowing the lawn, or weed whacking. Like it's just way more practical for me to do that and better. And sometimes it's better for her to do that, like the laundry, not because I think the laundry is I just hate doing it. I actually like, it gives me this crazy amount of anxiety folding everything, and she likes it. And so I was like, well, let's have you do that. But inside of leading that, so my whole point is like, I think when we lead as men in the initiation of team and making sure that the needs are being met, the natural response to that is this other connection. Not that you don't have to fight for it even then, but a lot of the fighting is in that. Can we create some teamwork?
And I like the way you say that, and I think that's what we have come to as well. And as I hear you describe your relationship with Lauren, I think Linda and I are the same way. And it's not like we've sat down and charted out, I do this, you do that. It's, we've worked it out over the years. I'm good at some things. I'm really good at some things. Yeah. Linda's really good at some things. And so I do parts, she does parts. It works great. And it's not like I'm in charge. Because there are times when I think we need to do what she thinks is the right thing to do, because she understands things in a different way than I do. And early on in our marriage, I thought I was so rational, so unemotional about and it was like, woman, why can't you be rational about these things? Not realizing that's not her gift. I mean, she's smart. Linda's really smart. That's not the issue. She sees things. Still, she's you've seen her and her a little bit, and she is, and she's like this emotional rocket scientist.
She is,
and it took me a long time to value that, and I mean, it sounds crazy now, but now I see that it's like it's her superpower.
Yeah,
and my superpower is my strength and my rational thinking about things.
Yeah,
and so we combine these superpowers, and we don't fight over these things, because we've figured out who's good at what.
Yeah. I love that, man. I think if more men starting out could really start to lead their families in a way where they are thinking about, okay, how do we become great partners and build so I like this other idea too. We're building a lifelong bond, because a lot of times I think we look at marriage and we think like, well, we bonded on the honeymoon night, like we got married. But if you think about it like this, like the stronger the bond, the stronger the marriage. And if you were to intentionally strategize on how you could build the strongest bond in your marriage, like it helps you to practically put into place what needs to happen in order to grow your marriage. And I just don't think we often think about marriage like that. I think a lot of times, maybe we don't think about it that much at all. Like I think a lot of guys don't really have a strategy for their marriage. And I'm not dogging anybody. Right. I'm literally saying, if it wasn't modeled for you, if you didn't have a dad that was coming home and doing partnership and connection, and then it's easy to just think marriage is what we have. And what I do is I go to work and we'll raise kids, but marriage is something that we're actively building it and strategizing and growing and tweaking and you like optimizing, and man, over 51 years, like you can build a bond that is just incredible.
It's been that way for us, and we have adjusted over the years. And I, in some ways, I feel like I've been married to 4 women, but they're all Linda.
Yeah.
And because she has been a teacher who worked outside the home early in our lives together. Then there was a season when she was raising small children, and that much of that went into her, although I certainly helped. But and then there was another season where she and I were off in school together in Sweden, and other times, and now this later season. So and through that entire time, it's a constant sense of adjustment. In fact, at one time we were having a conversation. I said, "Are we changing the terms of our relationship?" She says, "Yes."
Well, I think one of the biggest lies that somebody could tell you, or some of the worst advice that people can tell you, is don't ever change.
Oh yeah.
Don't ever change. And because the thing is like, there's so many things in our life that have to change. To think that I have hit the peak of my maturity in God, my maturity emotionally, my maturity spiritually, physically, to think that my marriage is everything that I am right now embodies the fullness of how God wants me to live, is just crazy. And we give that advice to people. And you're right. Like, she has for sure gone through these different seasons. You guys as a couple have gone through these different seasons where it has caused you to grow and change and morph, and you leave the old behind and you take some of the new with you, and then you reinvent for a while. And I know Lauren and I have even gone through that. So with our big kids, when they were little, we blended a family, and man, the married couple that we were back then, I mean, it was survival mode at first, trying to just be married. Lauren was an instant mom to, teenage kids to young kids who were sharing homes back and forth. And wow, that's so different from who we are today. And yet there was some great stuff and there was some bad stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Like I saw a lot of anxiety and stress and worry on both her and I in those seasons that we were like, hey, let's figure out how to leave that behind. And let's figure out how to move ahead, the trust and the faith and the resilience that we earned in that season. We've carried a lot of that over into now we're raising kids, right? Another set of kids that the stress level is way lower. The anxiety about what's going to happen is lower. But we have lots of resilience and lots of vision and lots of hope that we built back here. And it is true. Like, you really do have to change with the person that you're with in order to continue to build that bond.
Yeah. And part of building the bond, it feels like to me, along with changing, is laying our lives down for one another.
Yeah.
And I don't say that lightly. It sounds kind of churchy in a way, but it's really true, and I've seen this in both of us. As she lays her life down for me, it builds the strength of my bond to her. And I know as I demonstrate now, where life is more difficult for Linda just because of her situation, because I continue to lay down my life at an even deeper level, then that strengthens the bond. And so to me, that feels like an important part of this whole process, laying our lives down.
Yeah, it is. Okay, I've got a question that I want you to answer. And if you could tell your 20-year-old self anything, what would it be? If you can go back and have a conversation with him, what would that be?
Well, it's probably several things. I wish that I had come to the Lord earlier. I didn't come to the Lord until I was 35. Mm-hmm. And that was, so that was 85, 13 years into our marriage. And I think that we would have had a much stronger relationship if that had happened. So
what would you have told that guy at 20?
said, quit being so full of yourself and find out more about this Jesus.
What about the 40-year-old? What would you say to the 40-year-old?
The 40-year-old?
40, yeah. You can give him
I'm
some
thinking
advice.
back into my 40s here.
Yeah.
I would say, lay your life down more. It's not that it was a difficult season. It's just, I think that's been so powerful for me to see. And now I think it would have been even more helpful.
What would that have looked like?
I was really in that season when I was 40 years old. I was a supervisory biologist, and it was a difficult job, and very emotionally taxing, intellectually taxing, and it was a tough time in our family. But I focused so much time away from Linda and away from our children that I would say focus more on family, lay my life down for family, because the career was valuable. It was great, but my dad, he's 97 now, and he had a great career, and he was highly esteemed. But what does he think about in this season of his life? He thinks about his family. Yeah, and now I'm in my early 70s, and my family is at the top of my priority lists, and I lay my life down more for my family. It would have solved problems that we still have some echoes of today.
Yeah. I agree 100%. I mean, I think a lot of my regret, not that I stay up at night crying about it, but a lot of my regret is looking back and going, gosh, I wish I would have done more with my kids.
Totally.
And set up more, spent more time, because you don't get that time back. And at the end of the day, right, like it's almost all that really matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a 97-year-old man. This is mainly what he thinks about in these days. And he's constantly in contact with us and my siblings and I and our children and even his great-grandchildren. So family is a big deal.
What do you feel like the key to doing life really well as a man is? I mean, you've lived such an incredible life, and it really is true. Like when I think about the guys that I really want to emulate and be like in my life, you and Carl are up there. I look at you guys and go like, man, I want to have as much joy as Carl has.
Yeah, I love that.
At his age, and I want to feel as steady as you feel, and I think you just have such a security about who you are as a man and about your life, and you've done it so well. And so I'm just curious, like what would you say to that?
What would I say to?
What do you think the keys are, like, for men to really live the healthiest, best life they possibly can?
I think one of the pieces for me, and I really didn't discover this until I was in my early 40s. And this is when in that season in Anchorage when I was a supervisor, is I was trying to do life on my own with Linda. And being with Linda was good, but I didn't talk to her a whole bunch about what was going on at the office. I really wasn't talking to anyone about that.
Yeah.
And so it was tough.
Yeah.
And because I didn't know to do that.
Yeah.
And so this, probably going back to an earlier question, you asked, what would you tell your younger self? And one of those things would be to find men that I could have talked to about the issues of life. And even the decision of going to Anchorage or not, I wish that I had talked that over with friends who were brothers.
Yeah.
And so in that time frame, it was probably not about 1992 or 1993 in Anchorage that I began to connect with a group of guys, and we'd get together at 6:15 in the morning on Thursdays, I think it was, because we had to go to work, at 8:00. So we got there early, and we first started talking about things that weren't very substantive. Football and hunting, we were all interested in.
The normal stuff.
Guy stuff. And I thought, this is good, but it's not awesome. And so I was talking to a mentor, and he said, somebody's going to have to take a risk here. I knew who that was. And so I came in and said, guys, I'm struggling with pornography. And that season I was.
Yeah.
And so could have heard a pin drop. And yet they responded so well.
Wow.
And I thought, I didn't know what to think. I was just,
scared. Yeah.
And they responded so kindly and yet as men understanding the issue, even if it wasn't their issue. I mean, they understood.
Yeah.
And so we began to really talk about the issues of life that were really important. And one of which was I came towards a time of being ready to retire. And so I talked it over with these guys. I talked it over with my dad. And so it was really valuable to talk over those issues. And then when we moved back to our little town, then I had this group of guys there. And we got together at 6 a.m. on Sunday morning. So are you sensing a pattern here?
It's moving earlier and earlier.
And boy, we dove right in. We were in the deep end. We never splashed in the shallow end. Just the real deep issues of life, questions that kind of make your hair curl. Well, I don't have that much to curl. But
you have more than I have, right, man.
So it was powerful to be with 3 other men.
Yeah,
I could talk about anything, and these were my friends. These were my brothers. And then that pattern, I began to have that pattern, and so that for me feels like a massively important piece is to be connected with other men. I love the connection with my wife, but it's different.
Yeah.
Because talking to other men, I can because they understand at a visceral level what it is I'm going through, because they're going through it, likely, or something related to it. Whereas Linda, she's a woman. She doesn't get it at the same level. She is so supportive, and when she sees me having trouble, she's extraordinary. I mean, she can see me having a difficult time from a mile away.
Yeah.
And so she's so super supportive.
Women are so perceptive.
Oh man.
Yeah. And
so I'm not diminishing her role even a little bit, but the value is that to talk to another man, and I value that in you. And sometimes when you and I talk, we'd say, "How you doing?" And you're real. You say, "Well, going through this right now."
Yeah.
And I want to be the same way. And I want to be the same way with other men that I'm connected to. And I have that in the men's core groups we've been doing.
I think, to me, I look at it like this a lot, is if you're going through life, and we know life has so many different challenges, right? It's always evolving. Today is so different than yesterday for me. That's real. Like, I was a half an hour late to this because I literally feel like I'm in a battle, right? I'm over here like trying to, in these really hard meetings, but I don't have to do any of this stuff alone. Like, I can literally grab somebody who's stronger than me in this area of my life and pull them in. And now all of a sudden I have got double wisdom, right? I've got double insight. I've got double feedback. I've got my wisdom, my insight, my feedback that I'm doing myself, trying to solve this problem. Oh, all of a sudden I got 2. And now, if we can't solve it, man, we could bring somebody else in. And like, it's when we think about it, really, most of it is our ego that keeps anybody else out. And it keeps you isolated to, like, you just being the best that you're going to be. And it's interesting. I had a guy in my office recently, and he's got a real problem, which is no big, it's not like shame on you. You got a problem. He's got a real problem. His marriage isn't doing well. He's struggling with pornography, and he's in a real bind. And he's got a really good friend group, but he's the one guy in the friend group that doesn't want to talk. Right. So he's in it, and I love this guy. He's awesome. One of the a great man, great businessman, working hard. He's a great father, right? But he's working hard to be a great husband. He's got an issue. And his porn problem isn't, the problem isn't porn, right? The problem isn't that he's looking at porn. Right. This is his real issue over here, right? So all of his other friends are opening up. He's telling me this. All my friends are opening up and they're talking back and forth. And I said, well, what are you going to do? Like, what are you going to do? And he's like, God dang, man. What do you think I should do? I said, man, how long do you want this problem?
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to tell those guys? Right? How are you going to pull those guys into your mess? Because you actually need them in order to get out of this thing. But you can't get any of their help if you let your ego protect you. Because it's really interesting. Like, our ego comes in, we don't have to go off this crazy rant, but your ego comes in and it says, I'm going to take care of you. Like, you're going to be okay. That you don't want to open up to those guys. If you open up, they're going to see you different. They're not going to respect you. You're going to look weak. Your wife's going to be ashamed of you. And it's completely destroying and undercutting your life and keeping you from real connection in real depth. I said, man, you're going to have to take a hammer to your ego in order to, what's the benefit? You get all the strength of every man, every guy in your life. You can get their strength. All you have to exchange is your vulnerability, your honesty.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the key, isn't it? Is to lay down those shields that we put up so that we have these false fronts that we want to show the world. I remember thinking when I was a young man in my 20s, I suppose it was, that I was so proud of being self-sufficient.
Yeah.
And it was a trap. It was a trap. I wish I hadn't fallen in that trap so early, because some of the decisions I made, I'd have done it differently if I'd had brothers to be able to talk these things about. But the exchange is vulnerability. If you can't get vulnerable, then the good stuff's just not going to happen.
Yeah. It's so crazy because, like, when I think about going on a hunting trip by myself or going with some good friends. Going with good friends sounds so much better every time. Or, man, having a great fishing experience by myself or with friends every time is always so much better. And yet I think some of the times when we think about inviting guys into our lives, it always feels like this, gosh, I'm not sure that I really want to. And then you step out and you do it and you create a life like that. And pretty soon you're like, well, why wouldn't I have done this earlier? Yeah. Lauren and I were in a tough financial spot earlier this year, and I sat down 4 friends of mine who are wealthy. One of them's a multi-millionaire, and he's my age, and the other ones are very financially savvy. And I said, guys, like, I'm struggling. I've got $1,000 left in the bank.
Good for you for being so vulnerable. That's amazing.
Well, the flip side is I wanted their wisdom.
Yeah.
Right. And so we sat down. One of them was my dad. So my dad said, hey, let's look at your books. Let's look at where money's going. Let's look at how much your bills are. Let's look how much you're spending. And it feels a little bit like you're looking at my junk. You know what I mean? Like, really. I feel like, oof, got some measuring sticks happening. And I know I'm not going to measure up.
Looking good here. Yeah.
The fruit of that, though.
Yeah.
So in 2 months, I went from $1,000 in the bank to $15,000 in the bank from their input, their advice, their care, their concern. And not because they gave me money, didn't give me money, but I got their support. I got their wisdom. I got their encouragement. They were like, okay, Jay, you need to step out. You got to step out. And here's some things that you're not looking at. And here's some things that we got to do. And all of a sudden I was like, gosh, man, I went 2 years with burning my savings account from the money that we had gotten on the house that we had sold. And I could have, if I would have brought those guys in sooner, right? Like, I wouldn't have 10,000 extra dollars or 15. I would have 100,000 extra because we lived off of that until we didn't have anymore. And then all of a sudden I have a problem.
Yeah.
Instead of realizing, like, bro, you got a problem. You're losing money. You should be growing. Right. The best way to make money isn't save money. It's to create, it's to create wealth. And So anyways, I'm getting off on a tangent, but I think for me, it's not just like I do this stuff for you. You just do it because I'm trying to model it or it's fun. Like, this is actually how you live life. It's how we survive.
I've come to a place, particularly after the decision to move to Anchorage for us. It wasn't a horrible decision, but if I'd had brothers to talk it over with. And so I've come to a place where I don't make any major decision. I pray about it, obviously. I speak to Linda about it, obviously. I also lean into it with men who have my back.
Yeah.
And so, and even in our men's core groups, we're very, in terms of leading the men's core groups, this is something we do together, and we talk about all the pieces all the time. And one of our core values in men's core groups is vulnerability. We've recognized we have to be that. We model that. We don't just model it. That's not the right word. That's the way we live in our ministry leadership.
Can you just unpack what a core group is and like what actually happens and goes on in that?
We started, the first Bethel core group that I was involved with, we started in 2017. And there was a group of guys my age.
Young bucks.
Yeah. We called ourselves Life Stage 60s. And that doesn't work
and now
anymore.
You're in the 70s.
So we found each other in this gathering where we were trying to put these groups together. We found each other. It was like, I'm sure the Lord put us together is what happened. And we began meeting regularly, and it was really simple. I mean, it was not complicated.
Yeah.
We would do something like an icebreaker just to get to know each other, really, because you answer these ridiculous questions and you start finding out things about people, and they're not ridiculous. Sometimes they're valuable. And then we would do something called a deep question. And each men's core group is different, but that's a pretty common pattern. And a deep question might be something related to marriage, or it might be our lives as Jesus followers. And we want to ask each other questions so that we can open up and so that we can learn from each other. And I remember, as we've been in this experience now 6 years, is that I've found that what I have received from this is I've felt my own faith growing as I've been in the company of men who are serious about their faith.
Yeah.
And we all want to grow. All the men in this group want to grow in faith. And so it's just, it's almost like a virtuous cycle in some ways, where there's this input that's causing us to rise in our level of faith. So we really, in the hour and a half, 2 hours that we have in a group together, those are the kinds of things that we talk about. That's not all we do.
Yeah.
Sometimes with our group now, we'll get pizza maybe several times a year, 5 or 6 times a year. We've done other things too. We've gone on our own retreats.
Yeah.
We rent a VRBO someplace and just go for a weekend and make bacon.
That's awesome.
Cook bacon.
eat loads of bacon.
Yeah, right.
Raise the cholesterol level.
Yeah, but those are really great times where you're really spending quality time together.
That's cool.
Getting to know guys. And so each group's different, but the point is authenticity, vulnerability, commitment. And we want to be safe with one another. We want guys to recognize that the things that we talk about are other people could hurt us if they knew about some of these things. Yeah. People that didn't love us.
Yeah.
And so we want to be safe. And so we have we're probably 17 groups now in
at the church.
Yeah. And we want to have a couple different leaders in each group, and then we have leader teams that work together. So our leaders are actually part of a group of men, so that we as leaders are supporting one another. Yeah. And so it's not complicated.
Yeah, I love it. The guys that I've done it with in my life, it's typically started with us doing some adventures together.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, just going deeper, intentional lunches. So we did a lunch for 12 weeks where we just dive deep into the foundations of masculinity from BraveCo. So that was kind of like a catalyst on a lot of them for us. And then do some adventures on the weekend together too. Not every weekend, but a lot of them. A lot of my guy friends like to shoot our bows together or work out together. So I've got one of them that we work out together 4 days a week, which is really cool because it's like that touch point every single week. I'm going to see him several times. And that's been really fun in a way to, I think the word that you used a second ago, it wasn't nobility, but it means nobility. I can't remember. Anyways, that's really what we're trying to do. We're all aiming towards being noble men, right? We're all aiming towards like, how can I live a life that God's called me to live? And the Bible's super clear that accountability, that it's the iron that sharpens iron. It's getting around guys that are harder than you in different areas of their life and allowing them to hone you and shape you. And I love how the Bible says, blessed are the wounds of a friend and deceitful are the kisses of an enemy, because I think that we really do forget that a lot, that the point isn't to live a comfortable life. The point is to live a noble life. And that's where all the real fulfillment in life is. And so, man, I've just been so challenged over this last couple of years of, I think, running with you guys and leading men and having to lead the charge in my own life of like, how do I actually become a noble man that lives by virtues and values, that has a high standard, that continually grows, that can accept when I fail and make adjustments from that. Like, I feel like that's so important that we get to that place. What are your thoughts on how to live a noble life? And I'd love to just hear if you have some more insight on that.
I really like what you just said, because I think that encapsulates how I didn't think of those same words, but I think that's, you've said it really well, and that is living by virtues and values. And I know that you've talked about this as you've addressed the men at our men's gatherings at times, is values and living by those values and knowing who we are in Christ. And so to live in a way that's always what I do. In other words, in my private life, in my life around other men, my life with my family, in my life, all my interactions, I want to be the same man. And so I want to have a life that is lived by those standards, rather than just what the world is. It's easy to live in the drift, just drifting through life. But a life of nobility, to me, is a life of virtue, a life lived with values in mind, as it relates to my family, as it relates to ministry, as it relates to business. And so it leaks into all those places. And our children see these things, as you and I know well from living with your parents and me with mine. My parents lived by their virtues and values, and they may not have ever said that, but it was very clear to me growing up that that's what my dad did and my mom did. And in fact, my dad said to me a year or two ago, he said, I picked your mom. There's another gal I liked, but your mom was a Christian, and she was she was ardent in her faith. And so I said, I wanted her. And so they lived their lives as disciples before me. And it wasn't ostentatious. They didn't act religious, but they acted like people of faith.
Yeah.
And I know that you had that experience as well.
Yeah.
And so they live by virtues and values. My father is a noble man. And I am like my earthly father. I walk like him, I talk like him, I tell jokes like him.
Yeah.
And I am a noble man, because in no small part because my father is a noble man. And so it's great, it's important, and we have this opportunity as fathers to impart nobility to our children. And think how society can change as men become noble men. As we realize we don't have to live in the drift. There's these virtues and values that are embodied in the kingdom that Jesus taught us and that other men are around us are living in. We can live in an environment of we can choose the men that we live with, that's the way they live. And we will become like the people that we will become like our people. One of the reasons that we wanted to be here is I recognized these are my people here. And so it's not that there was anything wrong with my people in Anchorage. I love my friends in Anchorage and Alaska. And yet there was something about this culture that really drew us. And it's had a dramatic impact on my entire family, my family that lives here in Redding. And so nobility is, we don't use that word so much, but nobility is that kingdom value that it's so attractive to me. And I want to live my life as a noble man. And I want my children to see me living as a noble man. And I want my friends to see it and people around me.
I think it's what every man wants.
Yeah.
Right? When we really look at, I had someone ask me earlier, what does every man really want? Every man wants respect.
Yeah.
Every man really wants to be respected. And we try to do all kinds of things to be respected as men. You know, we chase women or hit the ball out of the ball field, do all these things. But what deep down, what we're all really, really wanting to is we all really want to be noble men that are worthy of being respected, that are worthy of the high calling that God's called us to. And the way that we live our life should be costing us something. It should be costing me delayed gratification. It should be costing, or instant gratification. It should be costing me that. It should be costing me my own desires. I don't go home and do what I want to do. Yeah. I go home and do what's best for the family. Right. And, it's all those tiny little things. It's like in laying down my desires, in pursuing what God's called me to, and being confronted by our friends and showing up and all those things creates this life that's actually worth living. It's God can look at it and go like, I'm pleased. Well done. Good and faithful servant. Like that at the end of the day, yeah. That's where we're trying to get to. And Dave, you truly are a noble man. And I just hope that so many guys would listen to this and listen to where you've come from and the wisdom that you're able to just give us for having gone through so much life and lived, such a great life that, guys, this really is the way to fulfillment and joy and peace. Dave, would you pray for us?
Sure. Yeah. Heavenly Father, I feel the call to nobility, and I know that many of our brothers who are watching, listening, feel that same call for nobility. So, Father, I ask that you give each one of us who hears that call that inner direction and purpose, setting our faces like flint to become noble men, serving in our families, serving our communities as noble men. We don't have to be ostentatious about it. All we have to do is be following that life of virtue and values that Jay talked about. So, Father, I ask for an impartation of nobility among the brotherhood of men throughout this land. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Dave, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Pleasure, man.
I appreciate it so much. BraveCo men, have an incredible week this week. And listen, go make noble decisions and follow us on this journey. Run with us on this journey to nobility. Thanks so much. Have a great week. Hey, BraveCo men. Hopefully you loved this week's episode. Listen, if you have not subscribed to our podcast, you're already behind. Go ahead and click here to subscribe. If you have not watched last week's episode, you can click right here and watch it. Have a great week.